Failure is not, it's just a waypoint. It's just a step in the process. It is not the end. Hey everybody, and welcome to our show, Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who don't want to live in busy, overwhelmed land and instead want to live in freedom and abundance and peace. I'm Liz Ferris, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on this lovely Friday.
Yes.
Everyone's favorite day of the week. So...
You're not very convincing. Moving on, though.
Yes. Sorry.
We can have this debate every day.
Not every day, just on Mondays and Fridays.
Yeah, that's right.
We're not going to have it the rest of the week. This week, we are talking about honesty and failure. And today, since it's Friday, we're going to talk about being complete.
Yeah, we're going to talk about learning to live in honesty. Some of the functional ways we actually do that.
Yeah.
These are ways that actually kill shame. We've been talking about that all week, too. Mm-hmm. How living in the CSCs takes shame's power away.
Right. Well, I feel like kind of by definition, being complete involves honesty.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be complete and not be honest. Because complete is about, being your entire self and being fully present in this moment rather than being stuck in the past, dealing with regret, or being stuck in the future and worrying, or just not being engaged with what is actually happening around us.
Yeah. Or, lying to yourself and everyone else by pretending to be some way that you're not or someone that you're not.
Right.
I mean, that's what we talked about yesterday. When there's a lack of repentance and confession, we're keeping a lot of really important stuff secret.
Yeah.
And that is diminishing our relationships.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the essence of complete is being honest with ourselves and honest with the people around us.
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that we're coming from a place where we've learned to live dishonestly.
Yeah.
That's our culture's default is to not be honest. So it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be an uphill battle to get into honest living and honest interactions with people. So we should be prepared for that. But we also should embrace that because that's our calling. It's a learned behavior to deal with shame.
Yeah, well, and I think it's so easy, when we're talking about failure, it's so easy to let failure define you.
Yeah.
To just be like, I am a failure because I made a mistake here and this is how I'm going to be the rest of my life, Or even if maybe the first time you make a mistake, you're like, no, I'm really not a failure. Then there's like that seed of doubt. And then every time you have a failure afterwards, you grow that perspective that that's who you are, rather than being able to separate and be like, this is an event that has nothing to do with who I am.
Yeah. And I think a real good way to cement in that complete outlook on your own life is to do some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. I mean, when there's a sin or a failure or an accident, to own it and say it out loud to God and to someone that you trust, because that's part of reality now. That's something that actually happened.
Right.
But shedding that light on it is part of the real world. But keeping it a secret is fantasy world.
Yeah, because you're pretending like it didn't happen.
Yeah, a big part of being in touch with our true selves. This is the step before entering into the gospel of grace that all believers go through, is realizing the significance of my sin, the sinfulness of it. Yeah. That's part of the real world. But once we're in the gospel of grace, that's the real world too. Our sin is gone. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be that struggle between the old guy and the new guy. Where is that talks about the flesh and the new man?
Well, there's several places.
Right.
Romans.
And that's our battle. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, because we want to be the person God's designed us to be. And like it says in Ephesians, we're destined to be holy. And, God has created us to be an image of his son. Like, we're not created to just live in sinfulness, and that's not who we are anymore. I think also, one of the reasons this is so important is because we get so far off course if we're not dealing with reality. Like, if you have this belief Well, for instance, like my belief I've talked about before that budgeting was super hard.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't budget for like ever. Well, not forever, but a decade. And so, I mean, I tried budgeting, but I was like, it's impossible to ever make the budget work. And so my creative problem solving was shut down because it was so stressful. And then it was impossible because it was so stressful.
Sure.
And so it just kind of, it's that, like, if you have an angle, where if you're trying to go straight and you are off by a couple of degrees, you end up significantly far. Yeah.
And the longer you walk, the more off course you are.
Right. So I think, when we lie to ourselves, even just letting failure define us, that becomes something that pushes us further and further off course the longer we keep believing that lie and the longer we keep walking in that lie.
Yeah. So how do we begin to walk away from that and do some course correction and get back on the mark? And I think there's some really powerful wisdom in the 12 steps, the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 steps. The two specifically I'm thinking about is step 9 and 10, where they're talking about making amends, and then going on to live they say committed to making personal inventory. So that's what we talk about all the time, like inspecting ourselves, keeping track of what's going on really in our heart and around us. So step 9 says, make direct amends to people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And that is all about speaking honesty and repentance and confession. And this is powerful because it's actually to the person that you injured.
Right.
I mean, we want to, except for when, and that's tricky, except for when it would actually hurt them more,
right,
or someone else. But I've done this. It's very, very powerful. It's an amazing healing experience, but it's also very intimidating, and it takes support going in.
Yeah.
From a sponsor or from an accountability partner or a pastor or a spouse or somebody.
I'm glad you added me to the list there.
But this is part of living honestly. And it's, I don't know, I just love the things like that display God's amazing healing power in a way that doesn't seem very powerful. It seems weak, right? To admit our problems and to ask for forgiveness. I don't know, for some reason.
It's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
We're making ourselves vulnerable.
Yeah. But we're stuck that's the world's wisdom too. It's like, don't do that. That's weakness. But it's really not. It's really strength. Yeah.
And I think, it is very powerful to do that. But you also have to recognize that you can only reach halfway.
That's right.
You can make your amends and the other person might blow up at you and it might blow up in your face and they might be like, I hate your guts.
Sure.
But you can't control their reaction. All you can control is the part that you do. And sometimes it works great and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and we're called to be responsible for our stuff, our side of the street. And it's always right to admit you're wrong and apologize. Can't control how it's going to turn out, though.
It's about our faithfulness and about who we want to be rather than about trying to accomplish a certain
outcome.
Yeah.
There's no magic formulas here.
Right. I guess I just was, I think it's easy to get sucked into the trap of thinking like, oh, well, I'll just apologize and then they're going to say this and then it's going to go great. And then sometimes it feels very blindsiding to have it not go well.
Sure.
Well,
and we need to learn how to apologize. There's plenty of resources for that too, but an actual apology is a lot different than what we're used to maybe.
Right.
Especially when you listen to celebrity apologies or people who get caught up in scandals. Like, if we think that's an apology.
If I did do that, well, I probably shouldn't have, and I'm very sorry if it affected someone.
Right.
And
yeah, that's why I say talk to somebody who knows, or read a book, or get a sponsor or something, because this is This is a skill that we don't tend to have in our culture, unfortunately.
But even if you do apologize the right way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to turn out well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. I just, like I said, I have been blindsided myself when I have apologized properly and it turned out terribly.
Yeah.
So being able to say, okay, yep, I'm still being faithful. I'm still doing what God's called me to do. And it's okay. It's not my fault that it didn't turn out well.
Yep.
It's important to have that
That's
in the back of your brain too.
That's part of complete too. We're like, I was obedient to God. I'm trusting whatever the results are. That's out of my control.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. And then the other step 10 I wanted to read just since I mentioned it. We continue to make personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admit it. So this has to do with self-examination and having short accounts with people, which that helps a lot.
It
I mean, it helps
does.
the apology go better when it's not 25 years later.
Yes. Well, it makes such a difference too. You know, it's a lot easier to apologize for something that happened yesterday or today, 2 seconds ago, than it is to apologize for something that you're like, hey, let me bring this thing up that you might have already forgotten because I can't tell how upset you were about it. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah.
Or, it's been eating away at me and I just got to get it off my chest type of apology, and maybe you forgot about it because it didn't affect you that much. But
right.
Either way, short accounts are always better.
Yes, totally.
And they're more honest. It's less of that secret lifestyle we've been talking about.
Yeah, because you're not secretly resentful towards the person or secretly ashamed of yourself in the context of that relationship. You can be open and free. Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that I had written down about the practical side of this is to not let failure be an end. Yeah. You know, failure is not, it's just a waypoint. It's just a step in the process. It is not the end. And if we let it be the end, then we have a choice every single time whether it's going to be the end. One of the things I wrote down was learning art. For me, like when I was a kid, I had people tell me that I was not creative. And so I was like, guess that's just me. I just suck at art. Yeah. I'm not going to do art anymore because art is too hard.
They talked you out of it, didn't they?
Right. And so it wasn't until I was an adult, actually after college, that I was like, hey, I'm going to try being creative. And it went fine.
Yeah.
But
you had to get past those memories.
Right. But I could have said, oh, well, because that's what I did say when I was a kid. I was like, well, I guess I'm just not creative. I'm just going to stop here.
These people obviously know.
Right. Because they're the best art critics in the world. Yeah. Being able to say, you have a choice every single time you fail at something to either let that be what defines you and let that be the end of it, or to say, this is a waypoint. This is an opportunity for me to grow, to learn, to change who I am, to change how I do things. You don't have to stay stuck there.
Yeah. Again, it's an amazing thing if you've got children in your life to watch them and how they learn. Just the basic things like learning to talk, learning to run, learning to throw a ball. I mean, they don't quit when it doesn't work out the first time.
Or the 40th time. They're so
they
cute. They
fail all the time. And yet they're getting better and better at functioning.
Right.
And for some reason we stop doing that when we get a certain age, I think.
Yeah.
We figure we ought to know everything by now, so we got to stop failing. And that's never true.
Right.
I've got to get that through my head. It's a tough one.
Yes. And we would never treat a child, we would never shame them for their failure. So we need to stop shaming ourselves.
Yeah. And in God's eyes, we're just wee babies.
Yes. Yeah. We're called to be childlike in the faith, have a childlike dependence on God. And I think part of that childlikeness is that willingness to keep learning and keep growing and to not just stay where we're at, Yeah. Children have such a zest.
Yeah, it's an amazing. And we see that as energy, don't we?
Yeah.
I think it wears us out, not being like children more often.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right. Well, hopefully that gives you guys some things to think about. I know I definitely want to work this year on handling failure better and being more resilient and having more of that childlike perspective on things rather than focusing on having failure be an end.
Yes, it's not the end. It's just the beginning.
Exactly.
So next week, we've been working through these 5 principles from the Dr. May book. We're going to talk about dignity all next week.
It'll be awesome.
Yeah. We'll all be very dignified.
So we might have some different ideas on what dignity is.
I'm sure we'll figure it out.
All right. We love you guys and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do share it with people. The more people that are living in the CSCs, the better the whole body of Christ is. Have an awesome weekend, you guys. We will talk to you on Monday.
So long.